I went from only running 20 miles per hour to running over 22 miles per hour in only 4 months. And the training methods I used to do that worked for more than just me. My whole team did these same things and all saw massive improvements to their performance. So here are 5 things I did to get way faster. The first is one of the most important things you can understand about developing any physical quality, whether that is speed, strength, change of direction, reactivity, or something else entirely. And it can be understood by the equation stimulus times time equals adaptation. In this case, stimulus means something that stresses the body and signals to it that it needs to change, adapt, and grow in order to hold up to the new demands that are being placed upon it. Time is simply how long the stimulus is applied from a broad perspective. So not how long you did it on one day, but more like how frequently you did it over the course of 6 months. And adaptation means how your body and nervous system have changed as a result of the stimuli applied to them. So in our case, if we can increase the stimulus or the time, then we will get bigger changes to our speed. However, there's a caveat. You can only sprint all out a couple of times per week and only a few times each session. That's why I think the best way to increase speed adaptations is to increase the time over which you apply that stimulus. In this case, I sprinted all out 1 to 2 times per week, every week, for months on end. It had a massive impact on my performance. The second is a key that a lot of athletes miss out on. It's pretty common for athletes to hit the weight room, whether to get faster, to get stronger, or just to build more muscle. And you can gain some awesome performance and injury prevention benefits from lifting, which is why I'm a huge proponent of lifting for every single athlete. But how you do it is really important. For example, last year I did pretty standard lifting where I just did the main compound lifts for 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps, and I ended up putting on about 100 pounds to all my lower body lifts. I got much faster and more athletic during that time, and it allowed me to create a foundation of strength which I think is necessary for everyone. However, this year I built my foundation in a completely different way, and the payoff in my performance was very significant. I started off by doing lots of long duration isometric holds. Isometric pretty much means static contraction, where your muscle fibers aren't lengthening or shortening, they're just staying in the same position. These are incredible for your tendons, your muscles, your connective tissues, and the list just goes on and on. From there, I progressed to heavy eccentrically focused lifts. The eccentric portion of a lift is where your muscle fibers are lengthening, so think the way down during a squat or the way down during a bicep curl. These have a few unique benefits that other types of training do not. The first is they cause tons of tissue damage, which is why you don't want to do them close to your competitive season, but they are fantastic during the off season. All the damage forces your body to remodel the tissues and has a big impact on the muscles and the tendons. The second is that you're stronger eccentrically than concentrically, and the concentric phase is the shortening of the muscle fibers, so the way up in a squat or the way up in a bicep curl. So you can overload your body with more weight than it can normally handle, causing massive adaptations that you can't normally get any other way, like by doing these single leg split squats with an eccentric focus and then using both legs to come up. The third is that they make you better at absorbing force quickly. Eccentric muscle contraction is how you absorb forces like those you experience during jumping and sprinting. The faster you can absorb force and the more force you can absorb, the more force you can then produce directly afterward. Think of this like a trampoline. The further and faster you push it down, the further and faster it'll launch you back in the opposite direction. But if the trampoline is too weak and it starts ripping, it'll lose some of the force you produced and you won't get launched as high. The third thing I did is a pretty controversial one. It worked really well for me and it was necessary for my situation, but that isn't necessarily the case for all athletes. For some context, I used to be a distance runner. However, I got mildly to seriously injured every single year, and it took me out of more practices and competitions than I could even count. When I decided to switch to sprinting last year so that my volume would be lower and I'd hopefully be healthier, my body instantly started adapting. I did a hybrid approach for a little while, but when I finally just completely stopped training endurance, I saw massive improvements in my speed and explosiveness. Endurance is undoubtedly a completely necessary and important part of physical fitness, and I think everyone should touch on it in their training occasionally, but I also think it should be kept within reason. A 20 to maybe 40-minute low-impact cardio session like biking or swimming is not detrimental to performance and is probably great for your health and overall athleticism. But long, high-impact cardio like long-distance running is probably not something that explosive athletes should be doing. Or if you are, you should at least do it with a lot of caution. It can cause huge loading on your system, and at least in my experience, if you do too much, it can really hurt your performance. The fourth thing I did is one of the massive keys that so many athletes miss out on. Every great trainer and coach I've ever listened to has emphasized the importance of doing this, and with good reason. Not only is it important for injury prevention, but it's also important for ensuring you can perform at the highest level and actually transfer the forces you produce into the ground. It is making sure your tires match your engine. You could have the most powerful engine ever made in your car, but if your tires have no treads, they'll just spin right out. The human equivalent of this example is your feet and your ankles. As your hips produce most of the power that you need during sprinting, your feet and ankles are responsible for actually getting that force into the ground. If they're weak, you'll lose some of that power that could be launching you down the track. Plus, foot and ankle training can help increase your reactivity, or your ability to quickly absorb and then redirect forces, which is one of the key physical abilities that almost all elite sprinters share. Train your feet and ankles properly, and I can pretty much guarantee you're going to get faster. The fifth thing is indescribably important. In fact, all of the other things I've talked about don't work unless you get this right. This might be the difference between becoming good and becoming great, and it is consistency. consistency. All the other little details don't matter in the slightest if you aren't consistent. Now, I already mentioned that you need to sprint often, but it's just as important that you hit the other aspects of your training just as frequently. You've got to get out and train at least 2 to 3 times per week, every single week, for a super long period of time. Do the simple things well and consistently, and it'll put you ahead of 90% of people. Now, all of these tips, unfortunately, are pretty much useless if you mess up your sleep and your recovery. And if I'm honest, every athlete I've ever talked to is messing up their sleep because people are lying to you about how much sleep you actually need. So check out this video if you want to learn how to optimize your sleep as an athlete.